So quite an enlightening conversation. We're going to be having a couple of polls. So one of the polls is obviously where you're from, and a couple of Q&As. So that's sort of the lineup for the day. Let me jump just straight in there and talk to you quickly about Topco and our purpose. What is purposeful businesses are generally trusted, and we're creating a network of top companies, startup, policymakers, and academia for decision makers in Africa. And we do that by researching the top 10,000 companies in South Africa. We've been doing that for over 20 years and celebrating and showcasing the leading companies through our different award programs like Africa Tech Week Awards. So, I mean, here's just a little bit of an idea of our ecosystem from top 500 companies, the future of HR. We do the public sector with the Department of GCIS. We do Vision 2030, Africa Tech Week. We do the Standard Bank Top Women Program, Top Empowerment. So we really cater to a large audience of C-suites in South Africa and internationals and organizations looking to do business on the continent. Africa Tech Week's purpose, it was, I think, coming from a media organization and really looking to grow our media organization and understanding that technology was an opportunity, what we realized more and more was that as we were implementing technologies, we found it very difficult to humanize it and to leverage them within the culture of our organizations. And so we brought together Africa Tech Week as a way of bringing decision makers and startups, corporates, policymakers together to really transform the world. And I think what we're seeing is, certainly through the awards like Aerotropic, is we're seeing a lot of our organizations like Masterclass are doing amazing things on the continent that can leverage and transform the world. So last year was our inaugural event, and we were voted one of the top tech events in Africa for startup by Venture Burn. So obviously very proud of that. What we're seeing more and more from digital transformation is, certainly for CIOs and decision makers and disruptors, is that connectivity is a critical issue. I think what we're seeing is those organizations who are able to leverage a culture of innovation are certainly thriving, and it's about constant change. And we're also seeing a new world where data is the new commodity and certainly is an opportunity, and where customer experience through technology and through digital transformation is important. But at the center of that, we're seeing a security of both our personal data and the company data as critical to this new world order. And so really just a bit of an overview, what we're seeing is CIOs more and more, their priority is connectivity and security. We're seeing the best practice of customer-centric companies. And we're also seeing reputational management versus legal requirements. And I think what you're going to learn today is that there are some legal requirements, but really what we're seeing more important is that your reputation, if you are not holding onto that information, you're not seen as a trusted company with secure information, you're gonna be in an uphill battle. So let me just now introduce our speakers. We've done the intros. So on my left, from Germany is Hans-Jürgen Schurnig, and he's the CEO and the owner of CYBERTEC. I mean, you're going to learn about CYBERTEC, but they're obviously an internationally respected organization that's working with some of the biggest organizations globally. And next we have, let me say, our fireside chat, our expert. I think what's great is to have Jans talking about the trends, but I think Andrew is going to be bringing a South African flavor to it. And Andrew is currently the MD of Cybermint. He actually was the Chief Operations Officer for Grindrod Bank. So he's our expert. We're really grateful he's taken the time to join us. And sort of just the way it's going to work is that Hans is going to present. We're going to have some polls. These are some of the polls. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have got pressing questions, please put them in the chat. We really, we think it's great for the panelists to help get that conversation. Andrew's obviously got some pre-arranged questions already. I think from our side, this is a free webinar. And so obviously, we understand that people are under some challenging situations, but really if you can keep it positive, this is about learning and it's about sharing best practice and it's about really understanding the trends. The guys are here to help. So if you can give them some help, put in some positive comments, some positive questions, that would be fantastic. We have got Africa Tech Week happening on the 14th and 15th September as a virtual summit, and we have the awards happening on the 15th September later on that year. So from me, it's over to, thank you. Hans, I think we can't hear your...
Yes, I just got started.
We can't hear your... oh, there you are.
Oh, okay. So good afternoon, everybody, and good morning, depending on where you are. So greetings from Europe, from Austria. We occasionally get conquered by the Germans once in a while, so, but we still call ourselves Austrian. Thank you for showing up to this class about high security database and enterprise applications. So thank you for your quick introduction. So let me quickly introduce you to what we are doing. We're basically a database company. We are specializing in database development. We're specializing in all kinds of data-related services. And we've been doing that on all continents since the year 2000. As you can see, we are a pretty international company. So we got offices in Europe, in Latin America, as well as in the vicinity of Johannesburg, as well as on Mauritius. So we are basically local to South Africa, so to speak. Regarding our customers, we've been working with some big names in the industries, which include, Amazon, United Nations, IBM, Nokia, Siemens. This is just a small selection of our customers. We are deeply involved with BMW, Porsche, and some other big names you might be familiar with. There are also some local corporations here, but as I stated before, we are very international, and we also have a reasonably good presence in Africa. So, as far as our services are concerned, we're working on machine learning, data science, big data, but primarily we are an open source database company with 20 years of experience in the field of Postgres. And this is what I want to focus on today as part of this webinar. So, why Postgres? I guess that's the most important questions many might ask. The data you can see here is up-to-date data from a website called DB Engines, and it basically measures the popularity of a database engine and how widespread it is. And if you look closely, you will see that companies such as Oracle are stagnating or falling. And you will especially see that with IBM, who did not have any growth since for years in the database market. So, but what you will also see is that Postgres is basically booming. People at Amazon have told me the other day when I was in Seattle that Postgres is the database technology in their cloud service with the highest growth rate. So Postgres is not just some emerging technology. It has been there for a very long time. It's rock solid. It's super reliable, and it's trendy, right? So it's popular, and popularity is good because it comes with reputation. It comes with security. It comes with testing, and it also is going to secure your investment. So it's not some strange niche product you might have never heard of. So it's really something that is very, very, very up to the job. So let me talk about data. So when we're talking about data, we really have to focus, from my point of view, and there are many ways to approach this topic, we have to focus on various threats. First of all, there is external risk, so meaning attacks from the outside. And this is what most people focus on, right? But we'll figure out that it's not the only aspect of this topic. The second thing is, which is often neglected, is the notion of internal risk. Then we got to take care of bugs, software failure, faulty intrusion detection, reliability, external software development, as well as incomplete information. I'm going to guide you through those things one by one, and you will see how you can basically approach those problems with open source software and with Postgres in particular. So if there are any questions, just feel free to somehow transmit them to me, and I will try to handle them. So attacks from the outside. That's a very common thing, and it's super obvious. You know, everybody's talking about attacks from the outside. So let's take a look. In 2019, one of our open source competitor called MongoDB earned the reputation of ransomware. So the hashtag on Twitter was ransomware. And what happened was that thousands of databases got basically hijacked by some guys, and the data was held for ransom, literally like hostage taking. And the last number I got was that about 20,000 systems were affected. And what we learned from that is that outside security does matter. And in this case, the reason for this notion of ransomware was that the default settings in MongoDB were so stupid that basically everybody had the same default password exposed to the internet. So all those databases were basically taken over by some bot, you know, just some automated attack. And this made it to the media, right? So if you're running, let's say, any kind of institution, and you will find your database in the media, that's not something you want, right? So the way to approach that is that people have to be a bit more aware of what's going on there. So what I would recommend in this case is, first of all, some external security audit, because the cost of data loss is potentially and possibly infinite. You might lose your business, you might lose the faith of your customers, which translates to loss of business. You might get into all kinds of trouble. So what audit really gives you is, first of all, it's finite cost, not infinite cost. And secondly, it's really going to give you some additional perspective on what's going on the security side, right? So this is super important. The important part here is also that auditing should happen on a regular basis, and it should be external. Why am I saying regular basis? We had a case here in Europe where a bank basically said that, okay, we're doing a security audit every 2 years. And what we found in 10 minutes was that a sample application was still installed on the internet banking service. You know, so you basically could run a sample database from the web on the platform where the internet banking was running, right? So obviously a security audit, which happens every 2 years and which is done internally, doesn't seem to be the solution to this kind of problem. So really keep in mind, security comes with a cost, but it comes with a lot more benefit, because it's like having a bullet-safe vest. You know, if you only have to be shot once, you know, but you will have your vest forever. Secondly, what people often forget is the concept of attacks from the inside. So if you look at the graph, you will see that external threats are not the most common thing. That by far greatest security threat is coming from inside. So my secretary knows all the invoices to the customers. She has my list of customers. She has access to my internet banking. And of course, that's ways more risky than having somebody hacking my credentials, you know? So the internal threads are basically the ones which really count. So it's not only, security is not only about external threats, it's also about internal threats. So you see all kinds of stuff, you know. Some time ago, we were training some call center agents in security, And one of our people raised the question, who is using his birthday or the name of his dog as his password? And 20 people put up their hands, right? And I would consider that to be an internal threat when you can just do a little bit of social engineering by asking people, do you use your birthday as a password, right? So that's something which also is quite important, and you really have to make sure that there is awareness inside the company regarding those things. So, what does it mean in real life? In South Korea, and this is not too recent, but you will find many of those messages on the internet, basically on a daily basis. 20 million people fell victim to an internal data leak. And it says the personal data of at least 20 million bank and credit card users in South Korea has been leaked. 20 million people in South Korea is basically, I mean, if we're talking about credit cards, it's half the country, or it's basically the entire country if you exclude elderly people and children. So if all credit cards of an entire nation are exposed because of some internal issue, I would call it a death sentence for the business. It's not something you can easily, wipe off the table. It's really the death sentence. And the question is, can you trust all the employees? I mean, you just fired somebody. What's going to happen? What kind of data is still available to this person? What is he going to tell to his competitors? So, internal security, in my judgment, is at least as important as external security. And it's always harder to defend because if you got a contract on your table, the cleaning lady is going to see it. The guy who's coming early is going to see it. So there's nothing easier than just having a cell phone, copying some pricing information and just give it to somebody else who might be one of your competitors or some Chinese secret service or whatever. So that's super important. So, as I said, first thing, external threats, internal threats. And then there is an additional thing, which is bugs and software failure. So to some people, this might be a bit obscure, but let me show you some examples what bugs and software failure really means. So now it's not only about stealing the data, it's also about having worthless data, which is equally bad. Let me give you an example. We've been working with a bank not too long ago, and as you know, a bank has to file reports with the national bank. So a bank has to create some information, reporting, risk assessment, how much money did you loan out, etc. And this kind of data is passed on to the national bank, which is basically the guys in charge of financial oversight of those guys. So what happened was that the risk guys in the bank found 50 million euros which were loaned to somebody, and the problem was they had no bloody idea who owed them. You're giving out 50 million euros in loans and you have no bloody idea where the money went. Somebody got 50 million, maybe he's even repaying his loan, but it makes no difference because the bank doesn't know that the loan is still there. We're talking about 50 million euros. It's not like 5 euros got stolen from some cash desk. We're talking about 50 million euros which just went off the chimney because they had a bug in the software. And the way they did it was an old ideological decision which said business logic has to be in the application, right? So there is this fundamentalist notion of that business logic has to be in the application. So obviously, over the past 50 years, this application had a bug, and it was not able to enforce this relationship between customer and loan. So the money went out of the chimney. And what I want to point out is that this ideological thing, this faith or this religion, as I would call it, cost them 50 million, right? And the way to fix it is that security is not a do it in the database or in the application. It's really about doing it on all levels. There is nothing wrong about having a security layer in the database in addition to what the application does. There's nothing wrong with that. The database is going to protect the application from stupid things, and the application is going to protect things going wrong on the database level, right? So there can be bugs on both sides, right? And by having security enforced on both levels, ideally in a consistent way, you can really make sure that those things don't happen. Because in this case, I've just shown you, your ideology has just cost you 50 million. That's a pretty expensive ideology if you're a bank, right? So you can enforce it on both levels, and that makes sense in my judgment, because you want your data to be protected at every possible level. So, of course, if you are a bank, you're not a proper bank if you're not doing external software development. And in this case, external software development can also be a security issue by itself. And let me show you what I mean by that. The classical problem is if software developers don't test their applications with real data, performance is going to be bad because they only tested with 5 rows. They might not find all the bugs because they just tested with 5 rows. They cannot properly test reporting because there are just 5 rows. What do you want to report on? They cannot test runtime. They cannot properly test anything if they just have 5 rows. The trouble is, if you give them the whole data set, you're basically giving them the key to the whole company. So if I was given all the data of all the customers of my bank, and I'm fired, and I might be a weak character, I mean, there is some incentive of just selling this stuff to somebody and just go on vacation for the rest of your life. And this has happened. We've seen cases in Liechtenstein where people working in the bank sold entire DVDs full of data to the German tax office, which in turn basically incarcerated people because of tax cheating in Liechtenstein. So giving whole data sets to developers is scary. Giving no data to developers is evenly scary because it's your applications are not going to work. The solution to this problem is what we call data masking. So the idea is you're coming up with a set of rules in your database, and you're running your data through those rules, and the output is going to be an obfuscated dump, which has the same statistical properties as the original data, but it's simply obfuscated. So instead of Hans, my name would be Joe, right? Or instead of Jane, you might be Jack or whatever. But prices might be as they are, names might be obfuscated, phone numbers might be obfuscated, addresses might be shuffled, or whatever there is. So your data has the same properties. It means it's the same amount of data, it's the same strange special characters, it's the same encoding, it's the same whatever you want. But the key data, which is personal data, which might be bank accounts associated with names and birthdays and stuff like that, this stuff can be obfuscated to make sure that you can safely give a full data set to the developers who can really test the performance of an application, who can really test, all the properties of the application, who can do reporting and stuff like that. So data masking allows you to have proper test data sets for your customers. And the way we do it is standard Postgres is not able to do obfuscation. There is no module for that. So we came up with Postgres Enterprise Edition, which is an improved and extended version of Postgres, which comes with a couple of security-related extensions to the database. And the most important ones are integrated data obfuscation. So you can define a security module a security model, sorry, which is just gonna enforce the rules before you give data away. In addition to that, it comes with on-disk encryption. So your database is encrypted. You cannot start it without basically having a key to the system. So all your databases are encrypted by default. It comes with a couple of performance improvement, included job scheduling and everything. And most importantly, it comes with anomaly detection and time-based constraints. So what do I mean by anomaly detection? I'm going to show you a bit later. So Postgres Enterprise Edition. So it's a Postgres distribution which is specifically optimized for large corporations. It comes with 24/7 support, and most importantly, it comes with additional security, as I stated before, and with built-in monitoring. So I'm gonna walk you through those things step by step, right? In the next topic. So the next thing when we're talking about security is the concept of faulty failure detection. So suppose somebody from inside or from the outside manages to penetrate your system, something goes wrong, and the guy is already in the house. So if you catch the guy quickly, things might work out okay. But what happens if you don't find the guy in time? And we've seen cases where systems were compromised for basically more than a year because there was no audit, there was no external proper external security, there was no proper internal security, and there was no proper intrusion detection. So things were just going on forever and a day because nobody noticed, you know. And that's usually the most expensive type of failure because you have a parasite in your system which constantly keeps sucking. And one of the examples here is what I saw in a financial institution, that a guy in charge of suspicious stock trading and bond trading stuff. So whenever a bond trade did not go through, what happens is a so-called cash settlement. So the bank is going to return the cash, and you're not going to get the paper you just purchased. And the guy who was in charge of this stuff, of all those transactions in doubt, just secretly sent small amounts of money to his German bank account. And Germany was not the ideal place to do that. So to send the money to Germany, because the German National Bank noticed that something is wrong, right? The bank which got the loss did not notice for over a year, and we're talking about ways over €1 million, so ways over 20 million rand in losses. The Germans noticed, not the local bank. And that's a problem. If the Germans wouldn't have noticed, the guy would still be sitting there and collecting his pension fund, right? And that's, of course, a huge issue, because if this makes it into the media, the loss in reputation is way higher than the financial loss. There is a second case, however. First of all, the solution to the problem is that you need anomaly detection. What do I mean by anomaly detection? If every day 20,000 rand go from one of your employees to a Chinese bank account or to some whatever strange thing, you might want to know, right? So you have to keep an eye on those things on the reporting level, on the database level, on the audit level. And the important thing here is really that audit trails do make a difference. We've seen that all the time. If people know that they are audited all the time, they stop doing stupid stuff. We've seen that in a social security institution over here in Europe. Imagine you have a company which has all the personal medical data of everybody. So imagine it's a government agency which has all the personal data of everybody. So you can figure out who is sick, what's somebody's income, where does he live, is he married, does he have children, what's his medical record. So all this data in a single place. And they hired a new guy. The guy started to work in this department. And the first thing he did was checking out all the medical records of all the women on his floor to check them for for sexual diseases, right? So the guy didn't know that he was audited. They caught him inspecting sexual diseases of his workmates, and they fired him, right? And that's the way you should do that. So by just spreading the word that things are audited in a proper way, you prevent stuff from happening, right? So an audit trail, communicating the fact that you're auditing is also going to make a big difference. So how do we do that? In our enterprise edition, basically we as a company, we implemented an extension for Postgres, which allows you to do automatic anomaly detection in the database. So we call it PGEE blends. So whenever something suspicious happens, we can put the lens and extract the data as it was at this point. So what could be an anomaly? It could be changes being made to the databases at unusual times. It could be structures being changed on Saturday in the evening, which is usually not what happens. It could be changes made to the data which are not the norm. So for some reasons, we got more transfers to, I don't know, Zimbabwe. For some reasons, we got repetitive patterns when it comes to transfers to Switzerland, same person, same amount, etc. So we're using machine learning and advanced anomaly detection on the data itself, so that we can see that the application is doing something suspicious, you know. So this is happening on the database level already. You don't have to change your application for that. You just have to be aware what might go on there, and the system is going to learn to see what's going on there, right? So it's on the database level. We can use it for audit. We can use it for anomaly detection on the business level, and we can use it for advanced system administration, just to make sure that you can detect problems in the system earlier in terms of availability, performance, and stuff like that. So PGT plans is a generic thing which allows us to learn from data, learn from behavior, and just ring the bell if we got the feeling that something is not right. And as I said, we can detect things earlier. People know that they are audited. They know this thing is in place. And this alone is already going to prevent a lot of stuff from happening. Right? Let me go back to a banking story. I got a lady in the area, quite close friend of mine, and she is working in the bank as an internal audit. And they had a case where a bank supervisor stole money from a handicapped transgender lady and kept a sex tape. So this thing was discovered by anomaly detection, because what you see here, the bank advisor, who is basically already classified as a trusted person. So basically the guy who is supposed to prevent that from happening is already the guy in question. Secondly, there was a private relation with those people, and the way they figured out is that obviously there was some strange recurring thing between an employee and the customer, and all kinds of stuff. So anomaly detection kicked in, and the guy was jailed. And of course the loss is on the bank. It usually doesn't go to the media because they don't want that to happen. But this thing would have gone on forever, because obviously there was a relationship between the guy, the criminal, and the victim. And if somebody is handicapped, they might not behave like normal people by just going to the police anyway. So especially if there is some private intercourse at stake. So you can see that machine-driven detection has value, if you can exclude the human to a large extent, it's more reliable already, you know. So you cannot cheat. Let's put it that way. You have to cheat the machine differently than you would cheat a human. So you might need both layers in the end. So after guiding you through those horror stories and showing some ways to prevent it, it's really important to develop a vision for your security system, right? So you got to develop a vision. And the way we do that, the first thing is what you really have to be aware of is you need a comprehensive solution. And it usually starts with a security assessment, and you have to be aware of the workflows in your organization. You have to identify the internal and external security threats. And this might be quite simple. One of our friends who happens to do those security audits has a very simple strategy to explain to people that they are at risk. And the way he does it is quite simple. Usually, the office of the CEO is at the end of the building. So you enter the door on one side, you go through the whole organization, and the office of the CEO, of those people in charge, is usually not the first one behind the secretary, it's the last one at the end. And he says, if he manages to steal paper between the entrance and the CEO's office, he has won the game. So imagine you're walking into the CEO's office and you tell him, by the way, how was the deal with IBM going recently, which you sold for 2 million? And he's going to fall off his chair and he's going to ask you, how do you know? And you put the paper on the table and says, well, it just happened to lie around in office openly. I just took it, you know? And this is how you make people aware of the fact that something is wrong. And his hobby is just to steal paper on the way from the entrance to the CEO's office. And if this guy can do it, everybody can do it. So you have to be really aware of where is data exposed. It's not only the IT system, it's the whole corporation. So comprehensive assessment, analyze your workflow, who has access to what is at risk electronically, what is at risk physically, what is at risk at all levels, right? And you can figure out with anomaly detection. I mean, there is an Austrian city, it's called Hallstatt, and they were wondering why they got so many Chinese people there until they figured out that they copied they basically made a whole copy of the city in China, right? So the anomaly would be, where do all the Chinese come from, right? What's going on there? At least you're aware that something is not normal, and this is already going to give you a huge edge. So obviously you need constant monitoring, and the most important thing, constant adjustment. There is no such thing as security forever. It doesn't exist. So security is a constant process which has to be adjusted. And of course, machine-driven anomaly detection can be a huge, huge benefit here. So finally, Postgres Enterprise Edition, it's a cost-effective alternative to our friends at Oracle, Microsoft, and IBM. It's going to come with automatic encryption. It's going to come with automatic support for obfuscation, so we can predict obfuscation models and stuff like that. And it's going to come in with built-in security. So we try to come up with a comprehensive solution with automatic anomaly detection and stuff like that. So what we can offer, we are a data company. So we're offering everything related to data, especially Postgres. So encryption, data masking, machine learning, cleanup, reporting, and stuff like that. So we're a database consultancy company. And yeah, finally, what I want to say is security matters. It really does. And yeah, keep learning. Be aware of security risk. Protect yourself against data risk. Make sure that your developers don't do anything stupid. Make sure that you come up with audits and a comprehensive security strategy. And let's move on to the questions. So I hope you like the show, and you're welcome to ask any
Wow.
kind of questions you want.
Well, thank you, Hans. That was for a non-IT person, that was very informative. It's just some practical things, right? It starts with have you done that audit? I think we want to launch a poll now, and then we're going to get straight into a bit of a fireside with Andrew and yourself. So I think if you can just answer this quick question: which databases do you currently use? We'll give you a second to just answer that, and we'll give you the results. I think what's intriguing with your presentation, Hans, was the case studies you give out. And I promise you, I do not have the 50 million euros. So they didn't send it to my account.
That's bad news. But if you know the database engineer, this can be arranged. I mean, they simply lost it. They couldn't believe it. The problem is they noticed when they had to file the report for the national bank, the numbers didn't add up.
Oh,
That's
wow.
okay with €5, but it's not okay with 50 million. And this is, unfortunately, it's not a joke. I'm not creative enough to come up with this kind of scheme.
I think what's interesting though is like you mentioned walking through someone's office, and not many people have a paperless office. So you think of data just on someone's computer or their email, but you're right. It's everywhere, right? It's within touching distance of an organization. So
if you can see the thing, BMW internal paper on my desk.
Yeah, crazy.
So this is, yeah,
so I think we're going to close off that poll now. And then thank you for that, Carl. So these are results. Okay.
0% Oracle. What happened? Did I scare you?
but 19% none at all. So
yeah,
okay.
90% TB2, right? Or TB half, as we say.
TB half. Okay. So okay. Well, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So Andrew, over to you to ask Hans all the hard questions, because I know that you've got a deeper insight than certainly I do. So are you ready, Hans?
I am ready. Give me help.
Okay. So
as well to help Andrew along, guys, in the Q&A if you can. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Please feel free to throw the questions into the chat. I'm gonna start with an easy one, Hans, because this one goes to an idea that I've been exploring, and that's this idea of redundant data or data we don't need. And in terms of securing the data and keeping data secure, what are your thoughts around pruning data and getting rid of unused or archiving unused or even derivable data? And the reason I'm asking this question is because the more data you have, and the more you're keeping, the more you have to maintain, and the greater the surface of attack might be. So that's the purpose of the question. And yeah, let's hear your thoughts.
So as a database person, deleting data is like murder, that's the first thing. And secondly, basically, when it comes to deleting data, there are really two souls in my body. First soul says, if you delete data, it can't be compromised, right? Nothing can happen. The second thing is that you are destroying your ability to do something useful with it, which means machine learning, detection, customer analysis, and analyzing behavior. So it's really this thing. So in my judgment, the strategy is get rid of the data in the production systems, but put it somewhere. Put it somewhere in an obfuscated way that it can still do the analysis without having to expose the original personal data. By the way, this is also mandatory according to some data privacy rules, which applies, I think, to pretty much all the continents.
Absolutely. So I wanted it's one of the questions that I had sort of on my list here is that it seems that as time goes by, the amount of regulation that enterprises, banks, corporates have to comply with seems to grow. And we've got POPI, Protection of Personal Information Act here in South Africa, GDPR in Europe, on which some of the POPI regulation is based, I believe, PSI, DSS, different type of data. But there's a whole plethora of regulation around protection of data. And one of the interesting things that I see is the right to be forgotten. I presume that touches, sort of extends the answer that you've just given about how one can be forgotten, but still maintain the integrity of the data that you have.
Yes, I think this is important. I think this right to be forgotten is that's actually enforced pretty harshly. So the fines for not being forgotten can be pretty harsh. But on the downside is you still have to keep it for accounting and for other purposes, because I cannot just forget the invoice you got yesterday for obvious reasons. So there are various things which have to be kept in mind. First of all, is sometimes it conflicts with a little bit with accounting, and secondly, obfuscation is the way to go, because you certainly don't want to forget how many spare parts you sold last year. So you certainly want to do that. So I think the key to all that is really, in my judgment, obfuscation.
Okay, so I'm just going to call out again to the group and say, if you've got any questions, please throw it into the chat. One of the things around when one does a data risk assessment, which is the concept that you described in the beginning, is to spend some time determining what, or identifying what is your sensitive data, and then deciding how you're going to deal with it. Do you differentiate in securing your data between sensitive data and non-sensitive data?
Basically, I try not to, because the reason is, if you classify data in some category, it tends to stay that way. And we've never seen databases becoming less important or smaller or contain less data. They have the tendency to add stuff, you know. So you might have telemetric data, which is super anonymous. It's cool, but at some point they add, you know, some. Recently we saw that some license data, which is not anonymous anymore. It's you can from this kind of data you can derive how many machines they produced and stuff like that. So yes, I see the idea of classifying stuff, but sometimes the classification comes with the problem of not considering something to be super important the other day, because the information you get out of a corporation, you don't get it out of the banking's core system. You get it out by somebody, you know, leaking some information to reporting. It's not compromising the core COBOL system. It's really this text file that is given to somebody for some analysis. And those are the ones which are hard to trace.
So let's follow up on that thought then about data sort of leaking, information leak, if you know, dribbling out of your data sources. One of the things, and you spoke about the auditing and being able to see in real time using machine learning, the analysis of behavior and so on. But one of the challenges that auditors face, for example, in corporates and financial institutions, is this problem of leaky audit trails and information leaking through subsystems and related systems of the data. What are your thoughts around that?
That's certainly an issue. I mean, you also have to keep in mind it's the audit trail that can be leaky, or it can just be the fact that you're in charge of the backup. So it's leaky data, which can leak through not going through the permission system, because you happen to be the guy who is in charge of doing the backup for the file system, you know, stuff like that. So or you are in charge of the audit trail. So for the audit trail, it's easier, because the audit trail might not. You could say that somebody touched person X, but you don't necessarily have to expose more information than necessary. First thing. Second thing is the backup thing is you can incorporate encryption into a backup, so that those guys who make sure that the backup is working don't necessarily have the key to make use of the backup, stuff like that. So there are various options to approach that, but leaking audit trails, I can tell you stories. Let's put it that way.
Okay, and I'm just taking a look here at the chat. Seems like the 40 or so attendees that we have on the channel at the moment aren't asking many questions, but I've got another one for you, and that relates to configuration. You know, a modern database can be a very complex system. The systems that it integrates to can be very complex. And therefore, managing the configuration of the solution and the database can be quite complex. What your thoughts around the configuration of the database and the system and its data security? Because a misconfiguration could obviously result in a disaster.
I believe in automation because imagine I give you a number. I'm working with some automotive companies, and one of them, not going to tell you which one, has 14,500 database systems. The question is not if something is misconfigured. The question is how many. That's the only question. It's not if. With 14,000 databases, it's not if, it's how many. And I believe that a lot of this stuff can be dealt with automation, so that the rollout is already same. And secondly, we also have a module, we call it PG permissions, which happens to be online and freely available for Postgres. It allows you to declaratively basically say how you want the world to be, and the system is going to give you the difference between what it is and what it should be. So let me just copy this into the chat quickly. So it's an extension. You could say all bookkeepers should be able to read bookkeeping data, and it's going to give you all the divergence between the desired state and the should be state. Because maybe a security system is perfect when you conceive it, but as soon as software updates come in, you might forget stuff, you might do stuff wrong, but you still want this golden rule to happen. Bookkeepers should only be allowed to do X on something. And this thing is going to cross-check the declarative target with the way it is. And it's also going to generate a diff script, which says, okay, this is how the world should be. This is how it is. Look, here is the fix. Because we've seen applications with 1,000 tables because they're so complicated. And this is going to give you a solution to managing this complexity.
That is an absolutely elegant way to approach it. And it happens to touch one of my personal mantras of everything as code. Let's automate rather than do it manually.
Exactly. I mean, it's even a matter of labor availability. I mean, try to hire DBAs to manage 15,000 databases. How many criminals are there going to be, and where are you going to find them?
Absolutely. I think there was an interesting news article recently about something to do with the Gautrain and somebody who worked internally with the data. I see that there's quite a few chats now, questions and answers, so maybe we should step to some of those. Have you got them there, Hans? Let's have a look. Vernon is asking, what would you recommend as the best practices of managing client-facing data and back-end databases and integrating between them?
What would make it the best practice of managing client-facing and backend databases? Also integration. Well, you have to take a look at those things on a case-per-case thing. This could boil down to simply to the volume of data. I mean, if you're looking for all the plumbers in Santon, which are 20 years old, there's no point in obfuscating them anymore because you know the guy, because the data is too small, you know. So it really boils down to case. because sometimes even the aggregate information is already too verbose. So I would really suggest take a look case by case and think like your enemy. I think the best approach is think like your enemy. If I paid you for, so imagine there was somebody out there with a pile of money. What would he want to buy? Right? If you try to approach things from this perspective, this is already a game changer, because think economically. If I give you money, what would you give me in return? And what would I do with that? In the absence of value, price becomes an issue. So look at the price and see how much value you can get there. And this is when you see the attack surface, because there are people who are going to destroy your system for fun, but there are going to be more people who have a purpose. They want to harm you because you fired him. They want to harm you because they want the data. They want to have your clients. There's a reason why people do that. So follow the reasons.
I see that Jaco has got some questions about, this is a nice controversial one. I think the answer is easy, Jaco. About what criteria did you use to select the database? I mean, why Postgres? I think you gave some clues to that in the beginning, but perhaps you can just summarize that for us.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for Postgres is very simple. We don't lose data. That's already a key thing. So Postgres is super reliable. Secondly, the code quality of Postgres internally is really, really good. So if you look at the Postgres source code, it's excellent. Secondly, it allows us to do all kinds of stuff on top of that. So it allows us to make extensions. It allows us to understand what's going on there. And most importantly, suppose you have a database and you find a bug. It's wrong. Something's wrong. This is a bug you identified. You go to Oracle and say, please, beloved Oracle, fix this bug. And the guy in Bangalore says, hello, this is Oracle first level support. Read the bloody documentation. If you say, look, my database is breaking. It's smoking there. Everything is broken. Hello, this is Oracle second level support. How may I help you? You explain all over again and nothing is going to happen. Nobody ever got help from those guys. The advantage of Postgres is we have code under control. We can read it. We can fix it. We can publish the fixes. The client can see the fix, and we can do it instantly. Because if you get a security problem and you get a fix half a year later, it's not going to purchase you anything. We got one case, Oracle, Swiss police. They got a bug fix from Oracle for Solaris after 4 years. 4 years. That's unacceptable. We're talking 4 hours, right?
Absolutely. And I actually just wanted to quickly have a look at the mirror of Postgres code on GitHub. And I see that there's nearly 43,000 commits. And in the period, I haven't really looked, but about 33 committers in recent times. So it's an actively maintained.
Yeah, and it's really actively maintained, because what I can show you just from a discussion I had 2 hours ago. Let me just tell you what we had just an hour ago. Just copy you the chat. One of our guys wrote me at 10 in the morning. I am looking forward to the next version. I fixed something, right? Here is the code. Take a look. So you can really change stuff. It's not like a God-given oracle falling from heaven. It's really like a thing where you have the ability to do stuff. So it's not that you can make the change, but you can pay somebody who can make a useful contribution, or can at least understand why things are the way they are. We had many cases where we got an error message we couldn't understand, and the client couldn't understand either. We checked the documentation, we still couldn't understand. So what we did was we checked the code, gave the customer a proper answer, and fixed the documentation. Right? So that's a classical scenario. It's not the exception, that's the rule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I personally love open source. I'm a big advocate, because especially in a highly secure environment. I like to know what's running there, and I like to know that it is discoverable, that it is knowable.
Knowable is an incredible asset, because we can talk about the beauty of the Oracle Optimizer. Has anybody ever seen what's going on there? Nobody knows that. You can't know. You're not supposed to know, right? How can we do security if you're not supposed to know what's going on there?
So, well, that is an interesting point, because it raises another topic about whether security by obfuscation is, or an obscure security is more secure than a transparent security.
How can you trust something you cannot inspect? I give you a suitcase full of money and I say, trust me, it's full of money. And you say, wow, this guy really gave me a suitcase full of money. I'm not allowed to open it, but I feel so secure because a NASDAQ listed company whose only purpose is to make profit told me that it's a suitcase full of money. Let's just trust them.
Oh, no, absolutely. So let's dive into some of these other questions. I see we have a noob question here about a beginner to Postgres administration. What tips should we give them to secure their data from the beginning? And this is more some basic stuff.
I can share some presentations I've given recently on step-by-step security for Postgres. We have a couple of documents here, and I can also recommend some of the books we published and which are super cheap to obtain. It has a step-by-step guideline. By the way, this is not marketing, because we're roughly making 15 rands per copy, so that's not going to feed us for long. So I really would recommend this thing here. Let me just type it into the chat. There is a step-by-step guide through all the layers of security. So I encourage you to get a pirate copy.
Perfect. I see that Liesel is asking about your approach to audit and vulnerability detection, and it ties into one of the pre-prepared questions I had here too, which goes around this idea of real-time auditing, particularly on trying to audit things like loss or alteration, and change of permissions, which you've touched on. But perhaps if you can dig a little bit deeper into your approach to vulnerability detection and the auditing process from a database perspective.
If you can automate it, the frequency doesn't matter, because it comes basically with very low cost, right? So if the check is automated, meaning updates there, permissions still okay, there's no additional price. If you automate it properly, you can save on recurring costs a bit. Otherwise, it depends on what it is. So I would have a hard time giving a generic answer, because it's a case-per-case thing. But in general, if it's automated, you don't care about the frequency, because it's almost free.
Liesel, if that helped you, oh, that's great. If it didn't, post another question. And I'm just cognizant of the time. Rolf, how much time do we still have?
Ralph, you're muted.
I got that. I'm still trying to get digitally enabled. Yeah, I saw that. So I think we're going to be closing off just now. So we've been going for just over an hour. I think we planned for about 45 minutes. I see another question just come in, but from Jacko. So I don't know if we just want to answer this question first.
Okay.
What are safe steps and processes, if you can, to migrate a database to a better one?
Well, the point is you have to get familiar with the technology. So you should know what it is. So you should basically know a little bit about the target system, which basically comes with a little bit of testing and education and stuff like that. Secondly, there are a ton of migration tools out there. We've also published some stuff in this area, which allows you to quickly migrate the database. the important thing here is database migration is one thing, application migration is the second thing. So you have to see the whole thing. So the migration of the database and the data itself, which is usually the easy part, but you have to make sure that the application is up to the job. If you're coming from Oracle, the critical thing which introduces a couple of bugs usually is null handling and stuff like that. So you have to make sure that the whole stack is fine.
Having been involved in a project like that myself not so long ago, one of the participants in the project described it as changing the engine of the aeroplane while still flying. And
that's easy. You have many of them, you know.
but one of
the
the
passengers deal with that.
yeah. Well, if you can. But exactly that is to have many of them. So have a mechanism to iteratively migrate your data so that you can do it on a daily basis, on a 5 times a day if you need to, so that that can work. And the other thing that I saw in that project, which has left a mark on me, is the idea of understanding the taxonomy of your data, because how it starts out in your legacy system and how you want it in the system where you're going is not going to be the same. So often what happens in these migration projects is not only are you migrating from one technology to another, not only does the application on top still have to work in real time across to the other side, but that the taxonomy of your data might change from here to here. And that requires understanding your data as much as it means understanding your tools. But yeah, so I'll leave it with that.
So let me show you something. You brought the example of aviation. This is paper, and this is the CV of an airplane. This gives the impression, thank you. This gives the impression that airplanes fly with paper and that airplanes are fueled by paper. In reality, they are maintained by mechanics and they fly with gasoline. The same with security, and airplane paper is the legal equivalent. This is a real airplane, by the way. This was real airplane paper. That's not fake. I didn't make it up. This thing does not add any security to the airplane because it's been because it's maintained by a mechanic. It's fueled with gasoline, and this is legal overhead coming from some bureaucrat who's not going to do anything for security. So if you are dealing with security, and what I'm trying to say is that don't produce paper tigers, produce engineers.
So, I mean, I think that we're very convinced that the market of the BMWs of the world, the big banks, they can get a lot of value from what you're doing. How relevant is this to startups and to mid-sized businesses who are looking for solutions, who maybe don't have the resources to invest in things like Oracle?
What happens is that I learned from a guy who managed to create a public traded company, who became successful and sold it on the stock exchange. And he said, the culture you establish up to roughly 20, 30 people is going to be maintained through the whole life cycle of the company. And if you change it, the thing is going to die. It's extremely hard to change the culture of a company. There are only a few companies which managed to do that, which was Pepsi, which was traditionally a low bid cola thing. Microsoft managed to do that with the new CEO, but most companies fail on changing culture, because if you do that, key people are going to leave and non-producers are going to stay. So develop a culture which leads to proper behavior early on, because it's going to be very hard to change later. It's the culture that makes the difference. Yeah, there's one question coming in. Any thoughts on upsides and downsides of hosting Postgres in the cloud versus a self-managed server? I'm not sure how honest I'm supposed to answer that. Does anybody remember Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, NSA, etc.? If I was the American Secret Service, I would like cloud services. If data is relevant,
the only comment one can make to that is only the paranoid survive, Hans.
Yeah, the point is, if you're a bank, in my judgment, a bank is an IT department with a sales department attached. That's what it is. So if you are an IT department with a sales department attached to it, would you give your biggest treasure to somebody somewhere for the promise that, guys, things are going to be fine, trust me, right? Would you give me your liver for the promise, trust me, I'm not going to eat it? I wouldn't.
So I'm gonna throw in a counter argument, Hans, and that is for maybe not so much for a large bank, but for a medium and smaller businesses, there is no way, in fact, even for large enterprises, there's no way that they can, for example, outspend an Amazon on getting the level of infrastructure, the level of security against hostile attacks, denial of service, all that sort of thing that they provide you out of the box. So you cannot outspend them from a security perspective. And therefore, it's very tempting to say that, well, maybe it's better just to use them rather than try and do it yourself.
I'm not totally opposed to CloudThing, don't get me wrong. It just depends on what you put there, right? If you have the bonus program for playing 5 rounds of some online game, the data there is irrelevant. If it's the core customer data, the core customer bookings, banking, whatever data, the number of stock deposits having around there, the question is, do you want to expose this data to the outside anyway? So if you're running some online game, who cares if I know your high score? You don't care, it's not relevant. But if I got a life insurance, which is there, which might live for 80 years, if you put on the life insurance at the age of 20, a private pension, you die at the age of 100 years. It's 100 years, it's 80 years of life expectancy of your life insurance. Would you give this core data to somebody for a promise? So the question is, it's not whether everything is cloud or everything is internal. Maybe the mixture is the right strategy. And I've been walking into banks more often than once, and they gave me 50 pages of data privacy protection, and you go to jail if you do this and that. And then the task was copy everything to some anonymous computing center somewhere for the promise of somebody.
So for Liesel's question, and just to give you some guidance in South Africa, there is the South African Reserve Bank has put out guidances on data offshoring and cloud computing. And not so long ago, I went through an exercise where, having gone through all of the requirements, there are 148 discrete requirements. Now, many of them are best practice or good practice, but many of them are quite onerous. And I think you can find that guidance note on the South African Reserve Bank's website if you trawl around a little bit.
Imagine you're a bank and you say, okay, guys, Amazon guys or whatever, I have 1,000 servers with you. I'm the bank of whatever. Let me go to a computing center and inspect stuff. What's going to happen? Nothing. Who are you? What? You want to inspect our computing center? Go away.
I mean, that limits the number of cloud providers you can use quite considerably.
We love your dog there, Hans. entertainment.
Oh yeah, he's called Edgar. Yeah, he just came by because there is some meat on my desk.
So I think
So this guy is a security risk for my lunch. You know?
So I think we're about out of time now. So we've got another 3 more in the series. I think what's really clear is that there's some practical and ethical issues here in terms of visibility, transparency of data, and how valuable it is, and how we can look for these anomalies. I was certainly intrigued knowing that we research 10,000 companies in South Africa and we hold a lot of data. So I see a lot of opportunities for us as well. It was really great to have you involved, Andrew. Thank you, Hans, and thank you everybody for logging in. We'll be sharing this video with you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
So thank you very much for everybody attending. Thank you for not dropping off. I hope you like the show, and looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I wrote down 3 bullets that I'd like to just end off. And just to quote Hans, the first one was, there's no such thing as security forever. It's a changing landscape. Think like your enemy, or like your dog after your lunch. And then the last one is it's all about culture. You need the proper culture from the beginning in your companies around being secure and being aware of data security. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.